Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or evening or early morning, depending on where you are. So happy to have you here with us for the 19th annual San Francisco Bay Area Japanese Lantern Ceremony for World Peace, and the first ever of those to be held online. As everybody knows, the situation in the world is very different from the way that we would like it to be and from the way that would enable us to actually hold the ceremony in person, which we considered for a while and concluded that it just was not safe to do so at all. So welcome everyone. We have people from many places, not just from the Bay Area. We will be blessed with some music from Akshi, who will be playing all the way from India. I also saw among the names of people who are here, Sachiko Mitsunaga, who I know from a few trips to Japan long ago. And Sachiko, I'm gathering that you probably are in Japan right now. But it's we're very glad to have you with us. We're very glad to have everyone with us. In 2002, I was invited to Japan to speak at a peace conference, and that turned into a speaking tour. And the first thing that my hosts organized was on the first day, soon after I arrived, was to go to the Peace Museum in Osaka. Sorry, moment there. And I met a woman there named Mrs. Iga, who was not a survivor of the atomic bombings, but a survivor of the firebombing of Osaka in World War II, and said she wanted people to know that it wasn't just the nuclear bombings, but that in fact, a lot of Japan was destroyed by firebombs. A lot of the structures were wood in those days, which made firebombing very sadly effective. But I asked her if she goes to a lantern ceremony every year, and she said she used to, but now her health doesn't always allow her to. And so I said, well, I will go to one on your behalf. And when I got back to the Bay Area, found out we didn't actually have one in the area. I was familiar with them because before I moved here, I was director of the Peace Resource Center in Santa Barbara, California, and they had been doing a lantern ceremony from long before I got there. And so we decided to call a few friends together to do a little thing just to honor my pledge to Mrs. Iga. And one person got very excited about it and happened to have a radio interview that day, unrelated, but promoted the event. And we had over 100 people, and it just went on from there. We have had as many as 4,500 people. You will see behind me during part of this ceremony today, different photographs taken at our event, and some of them you can see quite a large number of people. So it has become a community institution in the Bay Area. As a matter of fact, there is a guidebook, travel guide to what to do throughout the country when you're traveling, and the Bay Area Peace Lantern Ceremony is in it. So we have been remembering the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all wars and expressing our vision for peace now for 19 years, sadly moved online due to COVID-19, and but happy to be with all of you here in this form anyway. That is a little bit of the history of what we've done. Peace Lantern ceremonies, of course, have been done. They grew out of the Oban ceremony in Japan, and now many places do them on the anniversaries of the atomic bombings, where you light a candle in a lantern and float it on the water. And the Oban symbolism was that was the sending of the soul of the departed over to the other side. I'm sure I've got that a little bit wrong. Somebody who knows it better, please feel free to type it in the chat. but now it, in many places in Japan, is a remembrance of the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and a way to recommit ourselves toward a peaceful future. And we will actually have an action you can take online tonight uh, to help eliminate nuclear weapons as part of today's ceremony. I want to credit that video we just played. The 30-second video was done by Robert Gomez, somebody who came to our ceremony one year. And I would like to introduce Akshi. Akshi has lived in the Bay Area and has played in person at our Peace Lantern ceremony, and at the moment is in India, but will grace us with a few minutes of sitar music to help us start off the program tonight. So thank you very much, Akshi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really honored to be playing once again for the San Francisco Bay Area Peace Lantern ceremony. I'll play a small piece by Sarod Ples Amar and Ayala Ali Khan. It's called Mystic Dew. It's called Palm Springs, and it's from their album Mystic Dews. I hope you will enjoy this small piece. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akshay. We appreciate your coming to us all the way from India, and the music sounds beautiful, even with a little bit of distortion from the signal coming all the way around the world. So Akshay will play again a little later in the program. I want to take a minute to acknowledge the wonderful team of people who have contributed to putting together the Bay Area Peace Lantern ceremony over these past 19 years. If you notice that there are people who have a little peace sign in front of their names, like I do here, like Rachel does in the Zoom meeting, those are members of our committee. Those are people who have participated in the helping make the peace ceremony possible. And what I want to do is I'm going to allow everyone to unmute themselves for a minute, and I would like you to join me in giving a hand to all those people who have worked so hard to make this event happen. So, domo arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Bravo. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate that. Now I want to share a message from Mayors for Peace. The Mayors for Peace organization has members from all around the world. The mayor of Berkeley is a member of Mayors for Peace, and the former mayor of Berkeley, when I was on the Berkeley Peace and Justice Commission, actually sent me to represent him at the Mayors for Peace 55th annual meeting, I think it was, in Hiroshima, where I had the opportunity to meet with a number of mayors and other representatives around the world, including having a wonderful conversation with a guy whose name, I kid you not, was America. And that was really a wonderful experience. And I want to share a message from a few mayors from around the world. And this will be just a few minutes. We'll come back to it a couple of times. But give me a second here to get it going. It is what they put together for the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings.
In August 1945, 2 atomic bombs killed tens of thousands of people and brought devastation and unimaginable loss to the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 75 years on, in this milestone year, the world is faced with its toughest struggle since World War II. Whether it's COVID-19 or nuclear weapons, the ways to tackle common threats to humanity are fundamentally the same. All nations must take action from a humanitarian perspective, not from self-centered nationalism.
We must build one international coalition and work together for the whole of humanity. And civil society must support policymakers to pursue such goals. Join us in building a global partnership to realize a peaceful world free of nuclear weapons. The following are messages from many people who stand with us.
The United Nations will continue to work with the Hibakushas and redouble its efforts for the elimination of nuclear weapons. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
The victims of the bombing 75 years ago are a haunting testament why nuclear weapons must not be used again. The 10th NPT Rio Conference shall be a platform for further actions towards a world free of these terrible weapons. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
In commemorating the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings, let us recommit ourselves to abolish nuclear weapons. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
So we'll have a little bit of more of that later. And again, I want to invite everyone to, if you wish, type your own message into the chat expressing your wishes for peace, elimination of nuclear weapons, relevant messages to today's ceremony. Next, I want to call on Gary Gibson, who is a key member of our team who will share a little bit of this year's peace message from the mayor of Hiroshima.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to read some excerpts from the Hiroshima 2020 Peace Declaration. It begins, on August 6, 1945, a single atomic bomb destroyed our city. Rumor at the time had it that nothing will grow here for 75 years. And yet, Hiroshima recovered, becoming a symbol of peace visited by millions from around the world. Humanity struggles now against a new threat, the novel coronavirus. However, with what we have learned from the tragedies of the past, we should be able to overcome this threat. When the 1918 flu pandemic attacked a century ago, it took tens of millions of lives and terrorized the world because nations fighting World War I were unable to meet the threat together. A subsequent upsurge in nationalism led to World War II and the atomic bombings. We must never allow this painful past to repeat itself. Civil society must reject self-centered nationalism and unite against all threats. Last November, when Pope Francis visited our city, he left us with a powerful message: to remember, to journey together, to protect. These are three moral imperatives. Ogata Sadako, a UN High Commissioner for Refugees, worked passionately to assist those in need. She spoke from experience when she said, "The important thing is to save the lives of those who are suffering. No country can live in peace alone. The world is connected." These messages urge us to unite against threats to humanity and avoid repeating our tragic past. Hiroshima is what it is today because our predecessors cared about each other. They stood together through the ordeal. Visitors from other countries leave the Peace Memorial Museum with comments like, "Now we see this tragedy as our own," and "This is a lesson for the future of humanity." Hiroshima considers it our duty to build in civil society a consensus that the people of the world must unite to achieve nuclear weapons abolition and lasting world peace. At this Peace Memorial ceremony marking 75 years since the bombing, we offer heartfelt prayers for the peaceful repose of the souls of the atomic bomb victims. Together with Nagasaki and like-minded people around the world, we pledge to do everything in our power to abolish nuclear weapons and open a path to genuine and lasting world peace.
Thank you very much, Gary, for sharing that message from the mayor of Hiroshima. And you can also read it at the link that I pasted into the chat. Next, I want to call on Dr. Rita Marin, who is with the United Nations Association East Bay and very much of an international peacemaker, especially in the area of law and peace. I first met Rita, we served together on the Berkeley Peace and Justice Commission, and she has been a key member also of the committee putting together the Peace Lantern Ceremony, has done a lot of work for it over the years and spoken various times, and she has a message for us from the United Nations Association.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sorry we're not in closer proximity. We're noting with great sadness today that 75 years have passed since the atomic bomb was dropped by the U.S. on Hiroshima on the 6th of August, and 3 days later on Nagasaki on the 9th of August, 1945. The horror of that violence and the urgent need to prevent war and all forms of violence was uppermost in the minds of representatives of over 50 nations that came together voluntarily to establish the United Nations. May I intentionally repeat the word voluntarily to remind you that the concept of nations acting together, I quote here from the United Nations Charter, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, as is stated in the opening words of the United Nations Charter of 1945. That was indeed a voluntary act. Nobody was forced to do it, despite what leaders today give the impression for the involuntary nature of our joining together for peace. It is not a dream. It must be achieved. Today's 193 countries that are member nations of the UN all too frequently lapse in respecting the idea of ensuring that peace will prevail around the globe. The United Nations has many agencies to carry out this. We understand now, as a result of working on questions of peace and social justice and having created another document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, that peace is intersectional. You don't achieve it in just declarations or in just executive orders or in the will of nations with all their variations of needs, particularly today with the COVID-19 and with the climate change that's right behind COVID-19 waiting to do its own damage. We need the voluntary cooperation of all of these countries. How do we get it? We simply, well, not so simply. The United Nations has its complexities, as does every government, and we can look at what each of those branches of the United Nations is doing to see that where there are aspects of what we need to join and call upon the United Nations to do. It's hard to call upon the United Nations when so many leaders and I'm sorry to say in this country, have tried to weaken the effect of the UN, putting it forward as an obligatory thing. It is not obligatory. We voluntarily joined it. It has a good reason for coming into existence, and the reason today can be found in the departments on the environment, on human rights, on refugees, on climate control, and so on. I'll just name a couple of those agencies of the United Nations that I want to put forward to you are not utilized enough. It is up to us now that the United Nations, excuse me, itself has been dragged through different kinds of mud, I'm sorry to say. We need to call upon the UN to enter our spheres of problems when we need it. On its own today, the United Nations does fantastically enormous jobs for trying to feed more refugees than the world has ever seen, including after World War II. The division of the United Nations having to do with human rights, let me cite as one of the places where we are not fully utilizing the great power and strength of that department. For example, the High Commissioner for Human Rights happens to be a Chilean woman who was the High Commissioner, took a leave of absence to be president of her state, her nation in South America, in Peru, and has come back to the United Nations with the strength and diplomatic know-it-all and wear-it-all to be able to enter into our sometimes bilateral, sometimes multilateral problems around the world, especially, I would say, regarding the well-being of the human being. Every department has understood, and the world at large, philosophically, has understood that all of the needs of the human being, starting with basic existence and food and shelter and education, we need to turn our heads into each of those areas and figure out how we can pull it in to our negotiations, both in the United States and in all our multilateral dealings with other countries. The strength of the United Nations would be to come in when there are clear disputes and violence and war, come into it as a third party. The United Nations has the potential to be our third-party interventionist that brings nations together, and we hope voluntarily, but certainly now we know that voluntary alone does not do it. We need to say, these are your obligations under the Charter, which is the international agreement that was signed and ratified in 1945 and subsequently. And there are 193 countries ready to do service on that. What we need do is ask civil society to be that active member of the proactive forces at work today and help our governments to pull in the peacemakers, the negotiators, the third-party interventionists who can talk around the table with the governments that are raging now. I think the Secretaries General of the United Nations have asked us to be more proactive as civil society, and I think that the United Nations Association, which is a non-governmental organization, has been doing its work both around this country and in 100 countries around the world. So we've got a force waiting for its full power to assert itself, and it certainly is time now. I remind you, call on the United Nations in your nation, in your state, in your legislature. We do it, the United Nations Association does it in Washington with our lobbying on the Hill of the senators and members of the House. And we have a good, strong base. There are those who would like to change that. We're here, we're ready to discuss it, and we can do that as civil society. Thank you for the chance to say so.
Thank you very much, Rita, and thank you also for all your work over a very long period of time on behalf of the United Nations and a more civilized international order. So speaking of nations, I have a few more messages from some mayors for peace, and then we will have, we'll hear something from Nagasaki. Gary will be back for that, and then we will hear from Jack Dairiki, who is a survivor of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and also has been very active in our Peace Lantern ceremony efforts over the years.
The use of nuclear weapons should never be an option. They need to be abolished. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
L'objectiu de les armes nuclears són les persones, són les ciutats. Per això els alcaldes tenen l'obligació de treballar per la seva prohibició. Les ciutats no són objectius. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
As Hiroshima's twin city, Hanover has a special responsibility for peace. We will continue to do everything in our power to achieve global zero. Our message is no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
Dans les pas de Léo Figuière et de Catherine Margatet, je continuerai de plaider la voie de la paix de l'humanité et de dire avec vous toutes et tous, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, plus jamais ça.
Through the Mayors for Peace, we will work together for a more peaceful world, free of all weapons of mass destructions. On behalf of the people of Manchester, I pledge no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
We believe that weapons of mass destructions has no place in our humanity, and we express our solidarity with our peace education. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
Пусть пандемия не позволяет должным образом почтить память погибших. Эта память жива в наших сердцах. Больше не допустить подобных трагедий. Волгоград, Сталинград хочет этого всем сердцем. Хиросима и Нагасаки не должны повториться.
75 years after the bombing of the two Japanese cities, there is still no global ban on nuclear weapons. We need all countries to take their responsibility. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
ผมขอเชิญชวนให้เมืองต่างๆทั่วโลกร่วมกันสร้างสันติภาพเพื่อให้โลกใบนี้ปราศจากอาวุธนิวเคลียร์ No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
As we approach the 75th anniversary of the bombings, now is the time we really need progress towards the abolition of nuclear weapons. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
And we'll hear from them one more time before the end of the program. Next, I would like to invite Gary Gibson back. Gary is not only a core member of the Peace Lantern Committee, but also a leader in the Berkeley Sakai Association. And he has some information to share from Nagasaki for us, I believe.
Hi. So the Nagasaki Declaration, Peace Declaration, is not yet publicly available. So I'd just like to start by saying a little bit about Nagasaki to those of you who might not know much about it, starting with where it's located in Japan. Nagasaki is actually in the southwest corner of Japan. It's nestled between two mountains, sort of on the western coast of Kyushu, and it is one of the oldest port cities in all of Japan. When Japan entered its period of isolation, Nagasaki port was the only port in Japan that was open to foreign visitors from Europe and other parts of the world at large. The Nagasaki prefecture has the second largest coastline in the country and has the most islands embodying it out of all of Japan. On December 7th, 1955, Nagasaki City, speaking of sister cities, became the very first sister city in all of Japan, partnering with St. Paul, Minnesota in the United States. This began Japan's long history of cultural exchange with other countries. It's also the home of the world-renowned Nagasaki Peace Park, and the image behind me is the Peace Fountain from that park, and the Nagasaki Peace and Atomic Bomb Museum. These two sites together commemorate the bombing of Nagasaki and hope to inform future generations of the horror of war, especially of nuclear bombs, and seek to entreat all of us to strive for world peace and nuclear disarmament. 75 years ago, today for some, and tomorrow for others, since we're attending from different time zones, at 11:02 a.m., Nagasaki was the second city in Japan to suffer an atomic bombing during World War II. Each year on August 9th, at the annual Nagasaki Peace Ceremony, the mayor of Nagasaki reads the Nagasaki Peace Declaration. The 2020 declaration will be read at approximately 1:03 a.m. on August 9th, and about 33 minutes from now, our time. Ahead of that, many people from other international organizations and mayors from Nagasaki's sister cities and other cities have sent them messages of peace. And I'd like to share the message that was sent from the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota to its sister city, Nagasaki. It reads, as we mark the 65th year of our sister city relationship with Nagasaki, I'm proud and grateful for the history of exchange and of relationship and culture that we have shared between our two cities to bridge the world between us, especially amid this global pandemic that has us separated from people we live right next door to. It's important that we continue to think about how we spiritually connect with one another across our neighborhoods and across the globe. The symbols of our lasting friendship, such as the constellation earth sculpture in the Nagasaki Peace Park and the gift of cherry trees at our Como Park in St. Paul, are lasting symbols and lasting reminders of our commitment to unity. As we mark 75 years since the Nagasaki bombing at the Global Harmony Labyrinth in Como Park, and share the stories and history of those whose lives were forever changed by that event, let us recommit ourselves to unity and let us recommit ourselves to peace. On behalf of all of us here in St. Paul, we stand together with you, physically distant but socially connected in our fight for human dignity in our fight for harmony and our fight for peace across the entire globe. Thank you so much for this long-standing relationship, and we in St. Paul look forward to 65 more years.
Gary, thank you very much for sharing that message and a little bit of history. Nagasaki very often does get overlooked. Where people think of the atomic bombings, the name Hiroshima is what they think of. I know that the people of Nagasaki and the mayor of Nagasaki, who I've met and spoken with about this, appreciate that we acknowledge them as well as acknowledging Hiroshima every year. I want to now introduce a very special guest. Jack Dairiki is a survivor of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. He was born in the United States, but as a child moved back to Japan. And as it was a young teenager, 13 or 14, when he was waiting for a train to go to school on August 6, 1945, and something happened that had never happened in the world before, happened once more after that, and we hope will never again. And he will tell you a little bit about his experience. Jack, thank you very much. And he's also been someone who's made the Peace Lantern ceremony a success over many, many years.
Thank you, Steve, and all the other members of our group. Thank you for this opportunity. I went to Japan as a summer vacation guest on this August of 1941 on the last ship that left San Francisco, Tastamaru. And I was a fifth grader in the grammar school, Lincoln Grammar School in Sacramento. And at that time I was 10. So we got to Japan very nicely. Of course, the war was going on in the Europe. England and Germany was in at war. And but at that time of August 1941, United States was not involved with a war. Although Germany, Italy, and Japan was called the three axes that they formed together to fight against any other country. But the United States was not involved. So my visit to Japan, summer vacation, was to visit my ailing grandfather and to return in September, first week of September, to go assume my fifth grade student at grammar school. But when we tried to obtain passage to get back to the United States, lo and behold, we couldn't get a passage ticket to come back. And we didn't find until a decade later why this was so. And what they were doing was evacuating civil service people from the United States working in Japan, out of Japan. So somebody knew something was happening. So what happened to my father and I, just two of us, went to Japan, stranded for the 6 years in Japan. And going through grammar school to junior high school. At the December 1944, we were instructed from a school that because of lack of manpower, we were taken out of the classroom to help for the war effort. And we were in engineering school. So for me, I transferred from the junior high school in Kure to a city in Hiroshima, call it Engineering School of Hiroshima. And I was start to commute from my home village in outside of Hiroshima, about 4 stations away from Hiroshima. And I left the home station at 7:30 and got to Toyo Factory, which was the station before Hiroshima, Ukainada, present Toyo Kojo, presently it's Toyo Truck Factory. But during the war, we made rifles and airplane parts. And as I mentioned, I was 14. I was assigned to work on a lathe to grind down a high quality bar for a cylinder to use for the rifle making equipment. And as I mentioned earlier, Japan and Germany was axis. So we used to get machinery from Germany to make our rifle. But as you know, entering 1945, Germany started to lose the war. So we couldn't get any parts for machinery. So that's my assignment, was to make the substitute part for the machinery. And that was my assignment, working in a Toyo factory on a lathe and checking the bar, micrometer to get the bar. And it imagined 1 in 100 will come out perfect. It was that critical. But on the morning of August 6th, my train was delayed by bombing on the railroad track, strafing aircraft that came down. So our train hovered in the tunnel, and doing so, the schedule got delayed by 15 minutes. But this delay saved my life, because we were supposed to march into Hiroshima City that morning after roll call, because we were still students. And the reason was to break down war firewall, fire break barrier, just like we did in 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. Purposely build down the homes so the fire won't jump over. And as I mentioned, the delay of the 15 minutes of my train, I was still at the factory. But on the day of August 6th, at midnight, at 12 o'clock, we had a bombing raid. And this happened almost daily in Japan. And so people came out of their bedroom into the bomb shelter in front of their house or in the backyard, a pit dug into the earth 5 feet long by 3 feet wide and 5 feet deep. It had a heavy timber on top, and the earth below was put on top as a shelter. For the regular bomb, it might suffice, but for atomic bomb, no, it was just a big joke. But it was a false alarm, so people went back to bed. And around 7 o'clock in the morning, we had another air raid attack. This time we had a single bomber came back to Hiroshima. And when they came to Hiroshima, it was fogged over. And it was leaving the city to get to the next target, Kokura. But he saw a break in the sky and saw that break moving toward Hiroshima City. So the aircraft cracked a phone. AP was a signal. Aiming point became Hiroshima as the target. So that single plane left, and it was an all clear signal. Then about 8:15, we saw the 3 aircraft approaching Hiroshima. But long and behold, there was no siren. And we wonder why there's no alarm going when we see the aircraft above. The story goes that the aircraft was sighted about 20 miles north of Hiroshima, and the phone was cracked. And to the basement of the Hiroshima castle, there was a phone station, and the girl student took the message and cracked another phone to Hiroshima station. The enemy approaching, and then the man on the radio station run down the hall to press the button. That was 8:15. And that's why there was no alarm at 8:15 when the Enola Gay attacked Hiroshima. And the rest of the story, you know, explosion. The uranium bomb, the size of diameter of 1 meter and length of 3 meters, weighed 4 tons, and exploded a mile above Hiroshima. And that was done to have an umbrella effect on the Hiroshima. And the center of the core was 10 million degrees centigrade. And at the ground zero, it was several thousand degrees centigrade. Now you have to realize steel bar will melt at 1,500 degrees centigrade. And that's what happened. So anything around at ground zero just evaporated. There was a hospital there called Shima Hospital, and that just disappeared. And patient and doctor in the hospital was gone, just ashes. But statistics go, the Hiroshima had 55 hospitals. It was 10th largest city in Japan. And When the explosion happened, only 3 hospitals remained usable. There were 200 doctors assigned to Hiroshima City. When the bomb exploded, it came out to only 20 doctors survived to help the victim. And there were 2,000 nurses. Out of that, only 200 or less nurses survived. So you could see the enormous damage the atomic bomb done. And there was thousands of breaks in the firefighting equipment. There was forest fire, 12 all at once around the surrounding area. And rest is, as you know, the total city burned for 3 weeks, and people in the area decimated. 80,000 people died instantly. Now, my aunt, who lived with us, went out to the city because there was a call for fire breaks, and she was 19 at the time. She took the early train, 8 o'clock train, and arrived at the city. So she was on the roof, taking tile off for saving for future construction. And she saw the 3 same aircraft as she stood on the roof when the blast went off. So on the right-hand side of her body was exposed to the bomb, was blown, burned, and her right arm was burned. And she was blown off the roof, and I don't know how, but she somehow crawled and escaped out of the city into a temple or schoolyard to be cared for. And that was her story. And my father came to the factory where I worked because I told him we were going to be going to the city. So he came as soon as he heard the explosion and found that it was just a total chaos. Couldn't get any information. So he assumed that we marched into the city. He came to the bridge to cross into the city, where it was traffic was reversed. All the citizens of the city were escaping the city. So the MP stopped them. Nobody to enter the city. Then that happened. He went downstream, waited for the tide to subside, and waited across into the city, started looking for me one by one. The body was half burned, name tag, uniform was gone. And if he then asked my name, calling, it was just keep on going. And the city of Kure, a 1 hour train ride from Hiroshima, was firebombed about a month before. So Hiroshima was preparing for that. They had water tank, 100-gallon water tank in front of the building. And all you found was a pile of bodies. It jumped into the water tank to cool off on the fire, and they drowned there. And the river, the 7 rivers in Hiroshima, all the river was filled with bodies, dead bodies, and that's how the people died, to escape the fire that was going around them. And my father came home that night at 9 p.m. For me, I left the factory at 3 o'clock. That's why the permission given. If you're not injured, able to walk, you can leave the factory. And if you live away from the city. So I went down to the highway, and you saw droves of people escaping from the city. And here I saw a ghost train coming out of the city. I jumped on it, looked inside. The side of the train that was facing the bomb was bleached, burned off, all the paint was gone, window was smashed open, and inside the train was just a chaos of furniture all over and people calling for help, water, and first aid. Well, I had nothing to offer, so I jumped off the train and walked home to home, about 10 miles away. And when I got home, my grandmother was scanning the horizon, and she saw me coming and was very happy to see me alive. Oh, you're alive. And the first question was, where's my father? He went to look for you in the morning. And I had no idea what happened to him. So I looked, examined the building. All the sliding doors are on the floor, but no glass window was broken, 10 miles away from Hiroshima. So we put that up and went, had dinner and waiting for my father to return. He came back at 9 p.m. and he told us a story when he went to the city. The people are burned and suffering. And if you offer water to the victim, they suffocated and died from shock. And we noticed an aunt was missing. So the next morning, with a push cart, my grandfather and my father went to the city looking for her. And again, from body to body to body, she call out the name. If the person didn't answer, they just passed him. But on the third day, they finally discovered my aunt. And all she uttered a sound when they called her name. So they assumed it was her, because she was all burned. Her face blistered, gone. Name tag, clothes was gone. So they assumed it was her. She brought her home. And of course, no doctor, no medication. So my grandmother made a mashed potato. That became the bandage to put on the burned body. And my aunt screamed with pain, and she wanted to be killed or commit a death because it was so painful. So but somehow they saved her, and when she recovered, her finger was fused together. So they had to get operated and separated, and it never stretched out. It was bent like a ghost. And her right arm was bent at about 30-degree angle, and they couldn't get that straightened out. It always stayed bent. But she survived, and she's like me, telling her story to the world. She came to the United States and traveled to England and Germany by the Quaker, sponsored by the Quaker, saying, no atomic bomb to be dropped. This is what happened to me when you drop an atomic bomb. So she's doing the same thing I'm doing today in Japan. She's broadcast on television and radio. They never use atomic bomb again. And as you know, in the Peace Park, there's a stone carved with poem saying, please rest in peace, for this error shall never be repeated again. And this is a pledge to the people who survived the atomic bomb to stop the world atomic bomb and erase it totally, completely. And today, as you heard, the United Nations and all the country is trying to prevent another occurrence. And as you know, the North Koreans have always alarmed us that they are practicing on the missile or developing a missile, and even have a chart printed in a newspaper saying to the Washington, D.C. is 6,500 miles through from North Korea to Washington, and to New York about 6,000 miles, Chicago 6,500 miles, and San Francisco it's about 4,500 miles, L.A. about 5,000 miles, Seattle 4,500 miles, and Hawaii about 3,500 miles. They have it all marked out. So this is the danger we are living in. And as you know, we had a false alarm in Hawaii about a year ago, and the person pushed the wrong button, and people didn't know what to do. They hovered in a tunnel between the west and east Hawaii, and the family opened a manhole or maintenance hole to send down the children down underground, because they had no facilities to hide people from the bomb. But it was fortunately fourth alarm, and this type of thing will happen. So it's up to us to be alert and to understand and learn what atomic bomb does. It's a poisonous bomb, radiation in the system, and it's by Geneva Conference. You're never supposed to use the poison bomb in the world, and this was used in Japan.
Thank you very much, Jack. Very much appreciate your sharing your story and this information with us. And sorry we don't have more time, but we are running just about out of time for the program. And as you just said, we need to take action to eliminate nuclear weapons. And along those lines, Nancy and Doug Meritor here. Nancy is on the leadership of the Peace Alliance, as well as having also been a leader of the Peace Lantern ceremony for many years. And I would like to turn it over to her to offer an action that everyone can take.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. I we have to make sure that this happens never, never, never again. Thank you for sharing your story. Doug and I walked around the estuary a couple of days ago. We really miss being able to see everybody in person. And I just wanted to show one picture. I don't know if you can see it, but this is from a lantern ceremony in 2009. And it just reminds me of being there. So, yeah. So our action, there's an action, I think it's going to get posted in the chat, asking everybody to sign a petition in support of the nuclear weapons ban treaty. I think it was also in the invitation that went out, I'm not sure. In 2017, the United Nations treaty was adopted by 122 countries, and the United States was not one of those countries. It's time that we do join the global community and work for peace, work for banning nuclear weapons. The use of nuclear weapons, as we all know, will cause untold suffering to millions of people. It's a threat to the earth and to humankind. The treaty prohibits the possession, use, or threat of the use of nuclear weapons. And it's time for us to work to end this threat. So please, please go on and sign. And I'm just checking if it's there. You're going to post it, right?
It's in the chat.
Okay, so please go on and sign. As we all know, peace is a matter of life and death. So I want to thank you, Steve, for organizing this, and turn it back over to Akshi.
Yes. So we're back to Akshi for a little more wonderful music from India.
Hi, I'll be playing Silently Peace. It's called Vaishnav Janto, and it's by Mahatma Gandhi. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Akshay. And how appropriate to bring the spirit of Gandhiji into this event. Mahatma Gandhi is a big influence in my life, and certainly a reason why I decided to launch the Bay Area Peace Lantern Ceremony. We are past our official ending time. I want to tell you that we have just a couple other things left if you want to stay around for them. We have just a couple more minutes of the Mayors for Peace video with call to action from the mayor of Hiroshima. And then we have a little bit more of the slideshow, and that's really it. So I do want to announce that we are very much hoping that we will be able to do the 20th annual Bay Area Japanese Lantern Ceremony for World Peace on Saturday, August 7th, 2021. So mark your calendars now. And that we conduct the ceremony when we can in person at Berkeley's Aquatic Park. We do broadcast the audio, And I'm thinking now, with the way the world has changed and the number of people who are here today from other places around the country and around the world, that we ought to do a live stream video as well. I want to thank all the contributors who donated to the Lantern Ceremony this year and who have supported it every year. We purchased additional capacity for our Zoom account in order to make sure nobody be locked out because the account was full. And that was well covered by the contributors. Most of the money that was contributed is going to be stored up to help with the not insignificant costs of doing the live event next year. And I hope those of you who are local can come join us, and those of you who are in other places can join us online for that event as well. Thank you very much for coming. And just a couple more words from Mayors for Peace.
Geneva, a city known for promoting peace, joins its voice to the world community demanding the abolition of nuclear weapons. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
We need your help to raise across the globe both awareness of the inhumanity of nuclear weapons and support for their abolition. Share this video on social media, hit like, and leave a comment. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki.
Thank you again. And Rachel, if you have a few more slides to share, we can see a few more images from past Peace Lantern ceremonies. And once more, thank you everyone for coming to this today. It is very heartwarming to see all of you, and has been really just a comfort for me in particular at a time when we can't get together face to face. We at least can see each other through this medium.